come over here, please? If we could gather in front of the statue, please. You know, we can fill up this side over here too, people.
Yo, give a test. Kenny, do test 1, 2, test.
Check. 1, 2, 1, 2. You hear it?
No. One shot.
Let me know when you're ready, dude.
This is just started.
You always be having malfunctions.
All right, brother.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. And thank you all for coming out today as we remember and honor Black lives that have been lost to police violence. We have several different families out here who have been impacted. They will come up, they will speak to you, they will tell you their stories. We have several grassroots organizations out here as well. Several people are going to speak. We always say that when we're out here, we want to make it a teachable moment for you. Because we have a lot of people out here that may yell Black Lives Matter, but they don't know what to do in order to affect positive change. So I asked several different people who decided to come on and co-sponsor the event as well. I'd like to say thank you to all of them. And I'm going to just turn this over right now to our MC, Sunitha, who will then begin to tell you other information that you need to know and begin to introduce the speakers.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay through the mask if I'm talking this way? I'm all clear? Everyone, thank you so much for coming out today. It's really an honor and privilege to see all of you out here with us today. You know, this rally is really something that Kenneth dreamed up, and it really came out of his love and his feeling of loyalty for other families who have lost family members to police violence in Westchester. You know, I think one of the things we've talked about at the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform is you know, there are all these protests going on, right? There are all these names in the news. We're talking about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and all of these killings around the country, but the same thing happens here in Westchester. And there are families here who have lost loved ones to police violence, and there's reform that needs to happen here. You know, so today, we both want to elevate their stories. We want to give you that chance to get to know some of these families and hear what they've experienced, and also to meet those organizations around the county who are doing this work and who are working for change and who need your support, your time, you know, your momentum behind them to really affect that. So to kick us off today, I'm going to bring up Soraya Sampson, CEO and President of the Urban League of Westchester, to say a few words.
Good evening. Just on behalf of the Urban League of Westchester, I want to thank the families here in Westchester who've allowed us to join their voices in this call for action. Today's rally is the reminder that we don't need to look outside of Westchester to know why change is needed. We all know the basic rule. The systemic racism that has existed in our country for years has been normalized to make us believe that even though we know something is wrong, that we have accepted it as the way it was going to be. Black children graduate from school at rates substantially lower than our white counterparts, but that's just the way it is. We have disproportionately higher rates of infant mortality, but that's just the way it is. And we have the wealth gap is growing ever so much and ever so higher between the races, and we've accepted it as that's just the way it is. And our men, our women, and our children have been stopped, arrested, brutalized, and killed at the hands of law enforcement at a disproportionately higher rate. And most of us have known that for years and years. But that was the way it was. The structural racism that has been so excessive and discriminatory and burrowed so deeply into the way we are thinking have led us to believe that the way things has always been is the way that it should be and that it would be. And that's why we're all here today. We're all here today in the fight to have people understand why it is wrong and what needs to change. I know that you know that there's going to be opposition. And this is what I need to ask you to do. Don't listen to the opposition. Keep your eyes on the mission and what needs to change. They are there to lose our focus. They are there to distract us from our mission. And we have to keep our eyes on what we know and the change we need to have happen, not on the opposition. I have a litany list of things that we can do. And I'm not going to do it because there are a lot of people speaking today and there are a lot of people who are going to raise points. So I'm just going to pick out a few that I think are important for us to focus on. First of all, remind everyone who will listen to you, that Black Lives Matter is not a political issue. It is a civil rights and human rights issue. Secondly, many of you know that Governor Cuomo has issued an executive order that requires every police department in the state to conduct a review of police policies, procedures, and practices, and then to give a report back to him in April. It is on each and every one of us, even if we are not part of the standing committees, to make our voices heard, to get involved in the reviews, to make sure that your lived experience is valued and that you speak up for those who cannot come out and come to the table to speak for themselves. We are here now, we know the issues. I am speaking to the choir. And although we appreciate the symbolism attached to painting Black Lives Matter on the street, we would prefer the end to qualified immunity. When you speak to the people and in the committees, tell them that you want all police interrogations to be recorded. And we must demand also that the rules and regulations and policies of the agencies, including the procedure for filing misconduct complaints, be made public. And let me say this to you, we have been fighting for this for years. So if you think rules are something that are out there and that we see them, we have not, and we have been asking for them for years. Everyone here should become familiar with the provisions in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Among other things, it's going to create a nationwide misconduct registry to prevent problematic police officers who are fired from leaving one agency and moving to another jurisdiction without any accountability. It also mandates that state and local law enforcement agencies report use of force data in a disaggregated by race, sex, disability, religion, and age. Try to incorporate these provisions into your local communication, because if it doesn't happen on a federal level, you can ensure that it happens on a local level by making sure the people you put in office hear your voices. And before I end, I have to do this because it is important, and I know you've heard it before. Please fill out your census. It's how resources flow into our community. If you haven't done it, if you have done it, please tell your friends to do it and encourage them and help them if they need to. Give them access to your smartphone or your computer if they don't have it. And also, please vote. Please register to vote, and then please vote. That is the only way things will change. We've been fighting this battle with Ken and with our neighbors for years. The Urban League is over 100 years old. And if you want to know anything more about us, you can visit us at ulwc.org and hear about our programs and the work that we're doing. If you want to join with us as well and find out more about how you can get involved in the community, you can make a call or email us. Finally, I want to say this to all of you. Continue to speak truth to power. It is the main tool we have for change and ensuring that Black lives will finally matter in this country. Good luck to all of you.
Okay, so we mentioned today we really wanted to have you hear from a lot of families who have lost loved ones to police violence. So I'd like to invite up Officer Christopher Relisa, Father Stand Relief. He'd like to come up and say a few words.
Thank you. It's always hard for me to be here in White Plains, a block over. My son that was born and raised in this community actually came from Mount Vernon and a block over. He decided that he was going to help somebody. A year and a half on the job, he decided he was going to help somebody. 2 people were being mugged. There's a lot of folks that don't even know this. And the reason why they don't know this is because the news media, the district attorney, countless of police officers have swept the Christopher Ridley story under the rug. It's hard for me to do this. I said back then that I don't ever want anybody to be in the position I'm in. I can count how many people have been in this position. You don't understand what it is. Raise your child on the right side, and what happens? And then they dismiss you. But you can't dismiss me because I did the right thing. And he did the right thing that night that he came to White Plains to pick up his cousin, which was at work, because you know they said we don't work, we on welfare. Graduated from high school, was in a year and a half of college, became a police officer, came to this county, to this city, to help 2 people that were being mugged. They don't talk about that. All they talk about is, oh, he was out of his jurisdiction. Police officers are always police officers, no matter where they go, what they do. It's in their heart. They're going to do the right thing. He didn't have to. He could have sat in his car and just watched and did what he had to do and went on about his business. Got out of his car, did the right thing to save 2 people. People don't know about that. The district attorney at that time, did such a terrible thing, and I know her personally, did such a terrible thing with handling my son's case. Swept it under the rug. There's so many things that they did. The first thing that they did that I noticed is Robin Martin. Robin Martin, God bless the dead, is not here anymore, but he was there the day he was a police officer. And he was there that day. The first thing they did, News 12, they put Robin Martin out there. They said, that's the shooter. Well, I got a phone call from Al Sharpton. We're going to march. By 12 o'clock, 12 a.m., there's 3 more officers on the news. But they was trying to pin this on Robin Martin. Everybody knows, or would say, that Robin Martin pulled the trigger, that he killed my son. Robin Martin and I are friends. He knew my son. He knew my son was coming on the job. He spoke to my son. There's people at the trial that said that he spoke to them, and they dismissed it. The judge at the trial was just like, no, sir, that's not what happened. That's not in your testimony. He said, that is in my testimony, but y'all altered it. This is what they do.
That's right.
When you have to serve on jury duty, you gotta go. You have to go. And you have to go to grand juries, and you have to make your point. There was plenty of people that came to the grand jury, to the district attorney, there's police officers that brought them there, and they said, no, we can't use yours.
Yep.
Because it wasn't what they were talking about.
Yep. That's what they did. They did it in my case.
It wasn't what they were talking about. People over the 12 years have come to me and said, Mr. Ridley, I was there. Let me tell you what happened. My mother's friends that work in the building over there said, Mr. Ridley, let me tell you what happened. I came here. Oh, all of a sudden they got cameras up here. They didn't have those cameras up there 2 days after my son was killed. The cameras that they had, the pictures that they showed were terrible. We asked for them, they never gave them to us. So, when George Floyd was killed, and they said that he knew the officer. So I said, wait a minute. The gentleman that shot my son in the head was his platoon officer.
Say that again. Say it again.
The gentleman that shot my son in the head, he was shot 10 times. But the gentleman that shot him in the head, and I'm saying that nicely, that shot him in the head was his platoon officer. And when when they said that they knew one another, I said, what the? And I've had problems with this gentleman over time.
Yes.
He decided that he wanted to be in the academy, he wanted to be the officer that trained, that teach one-on-one police shooting. How do you kill somebody and you decide that you want to be that person? Not on my watch, not with my son. And I went up there to the county, and Damon Jones came with me, and we sat up there, and they tried to sweep that under the rug. That gentleman in the courtroom told me I did everything right. He said, I'll do it again. I said, not on my watch. So, yes, all lives matter. The reason why they don't bring Christopher Ridley up is because he's a police officer, and at this time and age, a lot of people don't like cops. But we have good cops around here. We have good police officers. And we have to back them. And we have to understand that this system is terrible. I have plenty of friends that are police officers, came in Mount Vernon, police officers, plenty of friends that work up in corrections. Guys, this has to stop. really has to stop. I don't know how many times I can stand in front of these cameras and see somebody die. And it brings back my son. Black men dying. Good black men. General Henry going to school. Was in college. Dead. Christopher Ridley. College. Job. Dead. So how many times do you turn your back? How many times do we see on TV police officers chasing a white suspect with a gun, with a knife? Nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. How many times do you keep continuing to look at this? That's my story. There's a lot. We have a lot to do. I'm going to continue to fight for my son. And I'm going to continue to be with everybody else. My good friend Kenneth. This brother right here, he's been pushing me to come tell my story. And it's just, I'm just, it's hard. And I want to thank you, man, for inviting me.
Yeah. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
Say his name, Christopher Ridley. Christopher Ridley.
And so next we're going to have Nada Kader from the Westpac Foundation, the Executive Director, come in and share a few words. Just an administrative point, there are some waters under the table back there for any action items people are talking about if you're on an action card over there, and there's voter registration going on as well. So there are some opportunities for you to participate and jump in and act right here tonight as well.
Thank you, Sunita. I want to express first my condolences to all the family members of loved ones who have been killed by police violence. I went to high school here in northern Westchester, and we learned almost nothing about Black history in the United States. So part of what our work is now is to learn that history. And at Westpac we have book discussions, and the latest one was a book entitled White Rage. It's written by Carol Anderson. I highly recommend people read her book. There was one particular moment in the book about the Great Migration when African Americans from the South were coming up here in the North and settling. And there was a story of a medical doctor, Dr. Sweet, who moved up north, brought his family, was very well educated and wanted to live in a neighborhood of his choosing. And it happened to be a working class white neighborhood. And the day his family moved in, the white mob organized, and Dr. Sweet called the local police department to protect his family from the white mob. And the local police department did not protect his family. Quite the opposite. It's a very moving story, and there are many, many hundreds, if not thousands of other stories similar. And I say this because the experience of different communities with law enforcement is very different. Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. was a Marine, and he also worked in Westchester County Department of Corrections. I don't know what he was thinking when he had the White Plains police officers banging on his door. But I can fully understand why he did not want to let armed men into his home. He was a Marine. He may have been having flashbacks. What I'd like to say is that we're in a very unique moment right now that we have to seize. because even the governor of New York State is now paying attention to what police accountability champions have been saying for years. The governor has taken steps, but the work is not over. So I urge you to please stay engaged in ways that you can. Kenneth Chamberlain founded the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform. We're meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30. We encourage all of you to get involved. We need your continued participation. Transforming police culture does not happen overnight. It takes time. It takes sustained community pressure. The fight for justice is not over. And one other thing before I'll pass off to the next person, WCPR is also important forum next Thursday at 7 p.m. that is being led by Vocal New York. Community Voices Heard is also co-sponsoring, and it's a very important conversation about re-envisioning community safety. What is community safety? And the social justice community says community safety is when every single person has access to adequate housing, healthcare, education, employment. That is community safety. Everyone with a job, with a living wage job. And I believe if these things are in place, if we guarantee as a society that we will take care of every single person's needs, I guarantee the crime rate will go down.
That's right. That's true. That's right.
Thank you all for coming. Please stay engaged. We need your continued participation.
All of those events that Nada mentioned that are coming up in the next 2 weeks, the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform, we have a Facebook page and a website. Please come check it out so you can find those details and join us. You know, like Nada said, we need every one of us to participate as much as we can. And, you know, even myself, I really started working with Kenneth 4 weeks ago. But every one of us has the opportunity to jump in now and take action. So at this point, I'd like to bring up another one of our family members. So if Nancy Maldonado could come join me up here, Jonathan's mother, to share a few words.
Thank you everybody for being here. Not just supporting me, but all families. Well, good evening, and my name is Nancy Maldonado. I'm the mother of Jonathan Maldonado. My name is Nancy Maldonado, and I'm the mother of Jonathan Maldonado. He died in the early evening on November 29, 2017. By Greenberg Police. He was tasered and tackled to the ground by them and eventually died. Many people love Jonathan, typical 21-year-old kid. He worked, had many friends, had a girlfriend, was a good son. And I've said it before, his passing, and I'll say it again. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine. So every month on the 29th, since the 17th, we gather at Webb Field, where this took place on Central Avenue. And we remember him, and we pray for him, and we pray for justice. And whether it's 5 people or 50 people or 100 people, we continue to do this for him. I haven't spoken much about this publicly up until recently, with, God rest his soul, George Floyd's situation. But it kind of opened my eyes a little bit more and realized, like, this is happening not just here, but it's everywhere. And if we can feel sorry and sympathize with other families out there, we need to sympathize for the families right here in Westchester County. I'm glad I've come across, who I've got to give him so much credit for Mr. Ken Chamberlain Jr., who I've come across maybe less than a year ago, who's kind of helping me through the ropes and this road of justice, I want to call it. So we walk the same shoes, and I'm learning from someone who is a true inspiration, and I hope to one day be not like him, but close enough to him. So again, I want to give the mic to my attorney, Deborah Cohen, who would like to say a few words. Thank you again all for being here.
Hello, everyone. I know many of you. I'm Deborah Cohen, and I'm one of the attorneys for the Maldonado family. This is the first time I've stood in this plaza with families who have suffered these kinds of tragedies. In 1996, I first stood here with the family of Charles Campbell as one of their attorneys. I've stood here and continue to stand with Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. We continue that fight. We've lived to fight another day, right, Ken? With the recent Second Circuit opinion saying that we need to go back to work. But what I am here to tell you about is something that just happened in the Maldonado case that I think is something that everyone here, everyone who is talking about the importance of speaking truth to power, needs to know about and pay attention to. As Nancy said, she really hasn't been giving interviews or talking publicly much other than at vigils for her son Jonathan. On June 8th, she gave an interview with Mr. Woodson at Black Westchester magazine. And he, being the great proponent of the First Amendment, made sure that many of the important things that she had to say were brought to the attention of officials in the town of Greenburgh. That's his First Amendment obligation and his First Amendment right. And his voice has been very important to so many of you. Exactly 1 month to the day after that, lawyers for the town of Greenburgh filed a motion asking the judge in our case to prohibit plaintiff from making further prejudicial statements in the media regarding this case. The town of Greenburgh's lawyers have filed a motion seeking to have this mother's voice no longer participate in this national conversation that's now taking place. So I'm here to say this to all of you. As one of the Maldonado family's attorneys, on July 29th, we will file our response, and we will speak loudly. We will speak truth to power as to how egregious this attempt to silence this mother is. And even if there are some restrictions put in place on the participants in this case, we know that her voice will never be silenced because she has all of you to speak for her and for herself. So, on behalf of the Maldonado family and Ken Chamberlain and all of the people that I've had the privilege, unfortunately too many of them, to try to walk this walk with, and I want to say moments like this where people like you come out and send them your love and support, I don't think that words can even tell you how important that is. So we will keep you posted about this, because if they can silence this mother, if they can try to limit her First Amendment rights under the Constitution, but to me as a mother, even more importantly, her right, her obligation, the necessity for her to speak for her son, who is no longer here to speak for himself, that will be a shameful moment. And it could affect any one of you if they're successful in silencing her. So thank you all, and continue the fight.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and we will speak loudly. You know, I think one of the voices Kenneth really wanted to include tonight was the youth voice. Yes, say his name, Jonathan Maldonado. Say his name. So we wanted to really include the youth voice today, and we see the youth out here in the streets and posting everywhere, really pushing us to be better and to speak louder. So I want to invite Nate Graves to come on up and speak for the youth.
So I don't want to take too much time, because the most important narratives, the most important truths are to the families who have lost loved ones, towards police brutality, to systemic racism, to many of the societal issues that we deal with. So, I've got a few talking points as it relates to youth and social change. There's a historic and a true power in incorporating the youth perspective in any change. Youth have always had a history of charging against the status quo, not conforming to parental or societal rules, professional paths, or social identities. When I was a junior at Dartmouth, Professor Rickford, who is now a professor of history at Cornell University, he told us that he admired us because we are not just because of our stories, but particularly because we were youth, and that our career plans were not straightforward. When he asked us about our plans post-graduation, our answers were a web of various skills, interests, scholastic work, interwoven with who we were. And before some of us knew it, he saw strength in our intersectional identities paired with our diverse intellectualism. Now let's talk about social justice movements with its ancestral roots in youthful energy. Harriet Tubman was around the age of 28, 29 when she escaped for freedom. SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee for the Civil Rights Movement, was built off of youth participation. Diane Nash and Ruby Smith were 22 and 18 respectively when they went for their sit-in at lunch encounters. Medgar Evans, field secretary of the NAACP, was in his late 20s, early 30s. Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan was 20 when she joined the Freedom Singers, and Angela Davis was in her 20s when she was in the Black Panthers and the feminist movement. With the LGBTQIA+ Stonewall movement, Marsha P. Johnson was 28, and Sylvia Revere was 17 at Stonewall. And we all are well aware of the student political activism of the Vietnam War. And the youth have always had they sit at a particular crossroads. They sit at a place whether they're going to adopt this system or whether they're going to introduce new change and reimagine and recreate a more just, a more inclusive, and a fairer system. And I largely believe this is because youth have not been fully subjected to social power dynamics, professional constraints, and the onslaught of adulting that adults have to manage. Youth offer a beautifully brash personality, a flexibility of thought, unrestrained creativity, education, wisdom, and reflexivity that are all essential to change. And the beauty of the youth voices is the fact that they do not have the systemic experience of politicians and lawyers and everyone that we call to power to implement change through legislation. And that's because youth are not confined to think within the systems in place. Youth think outside of the box. They think outside of the system. They're not privy to those rules. And critical reflection and analytical nuance has no age limit, no age bounds. So in speaking to youth about adult, a scholar who was speaking about youth and adult interactions, he's a scholar, as at least a social change, his name is Adam Fletcher. He said, perspective drive our actions, and our actions are reflected in our outcomes. So in that moment, in that same vein, I encourage politicians to develop panels and to hear youth perspectives before enacting legislation and campaigns. I implore them to hear the narratives of the families who have suffered at the most egregious oppressions of this world. And I encourage the youth not to be afraid of their voices and to utilize them, really utilize them. Talk to your parents, talk to your students, talk to your fellow students, your school boards, your teachers. everybody who holds office in educational systems and corrective systems, you need to share and use your voice. Your voice has such power. Change is very uncomfortable, but bringing all perspectives, all voices to the table, regardless of age or experience, will manifest solidarity to not create just a tolerable society, but a thrivable one. So all the youth out here, I encourage you to use your voice, to speak up when you see oppression, to speak up in high school settings, to speak up on college campuses, to speak up on the street, to speak up to your ministers, your pastors, your teachers, your superintendents, your board of education, your board leaders, your jobs, your employers, your managers. Speak up when you see oppressive systems in place. Because it's through that collective voice, through that collective sound, that sonic energy, that your voice and these narratives will apply communal pressure and change these systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's a great reminder, right, that every single one of us has an opportunity to participate and push for change and speak out when we see injustice in all of the places we live in and we occupy. This time I want to bring up Mondaire Jones, who's running for Congress in the 17th District of New York State. Mondaire, please come up and share a few words.
I want to start by expressing my deepest condolences to the family members who we've heard from today. No one should have to endure what they have endured. No one should have to endure what their lost family member endured. I'm here to tell you that we don't have to live this way. We can fight for and win a better future if we come together like what we're doing today and like what we've been doing in the streets over the past month. I'm not here today to share a story with you, but I am here to make a promise. My promise to you is that when I am the member of Congress to represent this district,
there you go. There it is.
in just a few months from now,
That's right.
you won't have to lobby me to center the experiences of black and brown people in law enforcement.
There you go. That's right. Talk about
And
it.
our interactions with police officers. When I am the member of Congress to represent this district in just a few months from now, I will bring my lived experiences as a black man in America to the policymaking discussion in Washington, D.C.
There you go.
That's what I'm talking about.
My promise to you is that I will fight to end qualified immunity.
Yeah, that's what we need. That's the main one.
My promise to you is that I will fight to enact national standards in policing.
That's right.
My promise to you is that I will fight to ensure that when there are negative interactions with police officers, that it's not left to the local district attorney's office to investigate and to prosecute where necessary.
Right. They ain't gonna do nothing.
Instead, that authority, that responsibility will be vested in an independent office. Folks who don't have to work every single day with the people who they are tasked then with supervising and investigating.
There you go. That's right. That makes a whole lot of sense.
My promise to you is that I will fight to end mass incarceration as we know it.
There you go.
To end mandatory minimums in sentencing so that judges have the discretion to look at the totality of a defendant's circumstances. I promise that I will fight to abolish private prisons in our society. We do live in a society that is supposed to be civilized.
That's right.
I will fight to decriminalize cannabis so that we no longer have a two-tiered system where black folks get in trouble for the same things that white people never even get stopped on the street for. I will fight to ensure that we fully fund that constitutional right to counsel that exists on paper, but that in practice all too often does not for the average individual who can't afford an attorney. when I am the member of Congress to represent this district in just a few months from now, you won't have to explain systemic racism to me. I understand that systemic racism and our conception of it must be broad enough to go beyond examples of our interactions with law enforcement and extend to include the way that we fund our systems of public education in our society.
Right. Court system, everything.
A largely property tax-based system that results in the concentration of tens of billions of dollars in white communities and the deprivation of Black and Hispanic kids of critical educational opportunities.
Right.
You won't have to explain to me that our conception of systemic racism must be broad enough to include a healthcare system that conditions one's ability to get necessary medical care on his or her economic means, resulting in undue harm to Black and brown communities in our society. You won't have to explain an economic system that is unfair on its face, that results in the concentration of 90% of this country's wealth in white communities and only 5% in Black and Hispanic communities. When I am the member of Congress to represent this district in just a few months from now, I promise that I will never stop fighting for you, that I will always be accessible to you, that I hope and extend the invitation for you to fight alongside me so that we can chart a better future for the United States of America, because we don't have to live like this. And if I have anything to say about it, we won't for too much longer.
So we're going to have another one of our family members speak. So I'd like to introduce at this time Henderson Clark, Kamal Flowers' brother, who lost his life weeks ago in Mount Vernon. Sorry, and Michelle, sorry.
First and foremost, I want to send my deepest condolences to everybody who's here, who has lost a family member to police. My personal beef is with the law enforcement system across the nation, mainly in Westchester County.
Amen.
June 5th, 2020, a little over a month ago, my brother was murdered by the New Rochelle Police Department. The story done reached so many people. There's videos out. They try to paint a bad image of my brother. Right, wrong, indifferent. Nobody's an angel. Nobody's perfect. My brother wasn't perfect, but he was mine. He was mine. We come from a family of structure. My father's from the islands, so anybody who's familiar with the islands, you know how hard structure your family is. We were taught to be men. My brother had mental issues. The system didn't help. Made mistakes, paid his debt to society. So have I. 2 years ago, little over 2 years ago, July 26, 2017, I was wrongfully accused by this system of making a drug transaction. I wasn't even in the state that same day. I have proof. They locked me up, made me bond out of jail to fight for my freedom. And I've been showing them since day one with proof that I wasn't here.
Sure.
I don't trust the system.
They're not.
My brother was murdered. They put out falsified reports from 6 o'clock. My brother was pulled over at 10:53, June 5th. 10:54, he was shot down in the street. The officer claimed he tased him. We viewed the body, no taser marks, burns, nothing. They said they shot him once in the paper. He was shot twice. They said they shot him in the chest. They shot him in the side. As I sit here with so much emotion that I know that y'all feel for your loved ones, I'm a little bit younger, might be a little bit older. I have rage to a point where my community has banned the police from patrolling our community. We police our own community. Since June 5th, we have ceased the drug dealing. We have ceased all the negative narratives that have been painted on our neighborhood. I personally wake up every morning at 7 o'clock and clean my neighborhood by myself. They said they shot him once in the paper. No help needed. This is what I do. My parents raised me to be this way. My brothers in my neighborhood, they help. They see a man. This is to the men. You are put on this earth to lead, with your woman, your queen, your significant other by your side, never behind you. You are to teach at any opportunity that you have, and your utmost obligation is to protect our women at any cost.
There you go. There you go.
I have 4,000 people on my neighborhood corner the night my brother was murdered with intentions to tear New Rochelle up. That kills my brother's memory. They look to me for direction. My direction is to get a learning center to help anybody with social, mental, any type of issues. Teach you about the law. What to do when you're interacting with police officers who can clearly show that they have a different agenda than doing their just.
That's right.
A lot of people have views. You have your opinion. That's your right. It's not the right and the obligation of the police to murder ours. Young, old, men, women, black, white, brown, Jewish, Muslim, does not matter. We are here for the common denominator. That is to fix the policies of all the police in every city across Westchester County. Yonkers police, they beat you physically for asking, why are you being pulled over? Greenberg police are racist.
Word.
I had encounters with them. White Plains police are racist.
Yes.
County police are racist. It doesn't matter what color they are.
Yes.
Mount Vernon police, very. They wrongfully accuse, they rob, they murder, they beat, they strip, and they deny. Now is our time.
That's right.
Now is our time. I'm familiar with Mr. Chamberlain. His father's story touched my heart and made me, at a young age, want to change the narrative in my neighborhood. July 1st, a couple days before, I made a Facebook post. I live by the First Amendment rights that they imply. July 1st, 3 federal agents ran up on me physically about my First Amendment right. I went live to protect myself. They cut my live feed at 1 minute and 13 seconds. Once I had the federal agents on camera. They're watching me. I'm not running nowhere. I'm standing strong. And I encourage all of y'all. Don't just do it for your city. Go to other cities. Be proud. Let your voice be heard. Not just home, everywhere else. The fight is amongst the injustice everywhere. God bless y'all all. I pray for every last one of you.
Thank you for just painting such a beautiful picture of the things you're doing. Let's say his name. Say his name. One more time. This time we're going to have Damon Jones come up, the New York representative for Blacks in Law Enforcement of America. So Damon, please come up and say a few words.
Jesus, I was looking for my glasses. They were up here all the time. Good evening, everybody. It's a black-tastic day to be out here talking about justice. My name is Damon Jones. I am the New York representative of Blacks in Law Enforcement of America, and I'm also the publisher of Black Westchester magazine. Thank you. Black Westchester magazine was started around injustice, around police brutality. The first article in Black Westchester magazine was about the 5 parole officers of New York State, black parole officers that was pulled over in Rockland County and had guns put to them while they had their bulletproof vests on, their badge around their necks, and driving in a New York State parole car.
Yep, I remember that.
That was the first article. When I stand and listen to my brother Stanley Ridley, and I've stood with him through the ordeal, it reminds me that in New York City, 110 black officers in plain clothes or off duty have been shot at, or killed by their white counterpart in uniform. And it has never happened in the reverse. There's never a case that a black uniform cop would shoot at, or kill a white off-duty police officer or plain clothes. So we understand that policing in America, its DNA is racism and white supremacy.
That's right.
And I'm here to say, policing's little sister, the police unions, are just as bad. Because even if you have a black union president, he falls victim to the white supremacist culture of the police union.
That's right.
And they do not protect officers that actually do their job. Anybody know the story of Carriole Horn, the Buffalo police officer who stopped an officer from choking a handcuffed black man, and she lost her job? There are many officers, black and white, that have stopped fellow officers from committing crimes, and they ended up losing their job. And as black law enforcement, we all should be sensitive to what goes on in our community. I've said it many times and I say it again. As black law enforcement, we are 4 degrees of separation from the police brutality victims. Either we know the victim, we know somebody that knows the victim is a family member, or we are the victim.
Yep.
So we should see more black law enforcement standing up. And there are a lot that stand up. But the culture of policing must be broken. The racist, white supremacist culture of policing must be broken. And let me make it clear to all the politicians that are here. The culture of policing eats policies and procedures for dinner. I'm going to say it again. The culture of policing eats policies and procedures for dinner. When you have a commander of a police department in NYPD kneel down with the protesters in solidarity, and that culture makes him apologize. Understand what we're dealing with here. We have to break the culture. We have to break the racist DNA of policing.
Right.
I thank the state officials and the governor for passing the no chokehold.
Amen.
But as law enforcement, we take MMA, martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and everything else. We could kill you. We don't need a chokehold. But we're still violating what? Policies, procedures, and training. So we need a law. We need a police criminality law that says if you violate policies, procedures, and training, your ass go to jail.
Straight up. There you go.
It's simple as that.
It's simple.
It's
That's
simple
right.
as that. I'm going to say it again so everybody can get it. And I'm going to add something to it. So if you violate, let me start. Police officers, law enforcement officers, we are paid by the taxpayer.
That's right.
We're paid by you.
That's for us.
Right? All this polo I got on is from you. My nice Wrangler truck over there is from you. It's from you. The benefits I get, these nice glasses that I left here, it's all from you. So we get everything we get is from the taxpayer.
That's right.
So if we willfully go out in the community that we sworn to protect and serve and violate the taxpayer through what? Policies, procedures, and training that leads to a severe injury or death, we should go to jail.
Right. Amen.
Simple
Yes,
as
sir.
that.
All of that.
So when you talk to your elected officials, and I love all my elected officials, we just don't need a chokehold bill. Because George Floyd didn't die of a chokehold. He died to the knee to the neck.
Right.
So we're going to wait 7 more years to get a knee to the neck bill. No. We're going to say this. We're going to ask our politicians to pass a police criminality law that if you violate policies, procedures, and training that leads to an injury or death, your ass go to jail. Thank you very much.
All right. There you go.
Thank you so much. So DJ Henry's family was not able to be with us this evening, but they gave Kenneth a statement that one of our coalition members will read now. So.
Thank you.
So DJ Henry was killed in 2010 in Pleasantville. The family regrets that they weren't able to be here, but they prepared a statement which I will read to you now. Black Lives Matter. The DJ Henry Dream Fund was created to honor the memory of our son, DJ, whose life was cut short in 2010. The recent death of George Floyd has been a dramatic reminder for our family and has served as a wake-up call to the world. We ask our community to listen to the pain of those who are suffering and take peaceful action in order to achieve change. The DJ Henry Dream Fund continues to be committed to local action. We serve one child at a time, connecting them to community-based programs so they feel included, not excluded. We address economic disparities by serving children of all races. Because when we lift up children, we lift up the communities. When a child participates in community-based programs with their peers, their sense of self-belonging and overall well-being improves. We do this as it is a reflection of his life. DJ always cared deeply for his family, friends, and teammates. We continue to support and grieve with the many families who've been impacted by economic disparities, by race-based violence, and by any police officer who ignores their duty to protect and serve. Together, we can stand and continue to take action towards change. Warmly, the Henry family and DJ Henry Dream Team Fund.
Thank you so much. let's say DJ Henry's name together a few times here. Let's say his name. DJ Henry. One more time. DJ Henry. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to ask Jeff Descovich to come up and share a few words with us and speak about his foundation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Descovich, and I was exonerated through DNA evidence after spending 16 years in prison, wrongfully convicted, right here in White Plains, in this very courtroom behind me. My life is dedicated to fighting wrongful conviction and criminal justice reform. This past May, not the one that went by, but in 2019, I graduated law school here in White Plains. I started the Jeffrey Descovich Foundation for Justice, and we've been able to get 7 people home in 7 years that were wrongfully imprisoned. And we were able to help pass laws leading to improved identification procedures, videotaping interrogation, DNA data bank expansion. Working in the coalition group, It Could Happen to You, we were able to pass 3 additional laws, an oversight board for prosecutors in New York. And we gathered together with other organizations and advocates, and we helped to pass a law pertaining to discovery reform, meaning sharing information between the prosecution and the defense, that both sides can have access to the evidence. That has the best chance of leading to a fair outcome.
Right.
Lastly, I'm also with Restorative Justice International, which focuses on making crime victims, offenders, whole back to the point that they can be, rather than just strictly a punitive model. So I have a few things quickly to say. Firstly, wrongful conviction and other criminal justice issues which I'm going to mention, we need to keep all of these things in focus while we are correctly focused on unjustifiable deadly police force and police brutality. We can't forget about the other issues. An African American defendant is 5 times more likely than a white defendant to be wrongfully convicted of murder.
Oh, yeah.
It is not only police violence when police engage in unjustifiable deadly police force and police brutality, but it is police violence when they coerce a false confession out of a suspect, which is what happened to me. It is police violence when they come to court and they do what's called testifying. It is police violence when they frame people, when they plant evidence, as recently came to light in Mount Vernon. It is police violence when they withhold evidence of innocence. And while we're focusing on reforming the criminal justice system, let's not forget about the prosecutors. It's the prosecutors that often prosecute victims of police brutality for assault that the cops have falsely charged in order to help them get away with the crimes that they committed. It's the prosecutors that can seemingly push the envelope and convict anything and everything, indict everything to the point that they have that saying, you can indict a ham sandwich, but suddenly they're inept. Suddenly they're unable to prosecute if it comes to indicting a police officer, if it comes to getting a murder conviction of a police officer, if it comes to prosecuting a police officer engaging in brutality. It's the police, it's the prosecutor who uses evidence, where even if it's obtained in violation of our constitutional rights. It's the prosecutor that is using the coerced false confessions. It's the prosecutors that are using identification evidence after using lineup procedures that are unfair. It's the prosecutors that are using informants whose stories keep changing and changing and changing, putting them on the stand, allowing people to lie and not correcting them, sometimes threatening the witnesses to get them to lie. So let's not forget the prosecutors, is what my point is. In terms of reform, we need to repass that oversight board for prosecutors, the Commission on Prosecutor Conduct. When the District Attorneys Association sued and came to court to try to invalidate the law, the judge rejected all of their arguments, but found a problem with the appellate procedure within that. So we're in the process of repassing that. We need to express to our elected officials, we insist that the Commission on Prosecutor Conduct be repassed. We need to insist that the exceptions that were made when New York State passed that law mandating videotaping of interrogations, for some reason they made an exception when it came to second-degree murder. They made an exception when it comes to drug cases. They made an exception when it comes to sex offenses. So my rhetorical question is, well, in which type of those cases would it be okay to have a wrongful conviction caused by a coerced false confession? Because that's what the purpose of videotaping is, to prevent. So I guess in some of those crimes it's okay. You know what? It's not okay in any situation. So we need that legislation passed. Let's remember mass incarceration. Let's remember parole reform. Let's remember prison reform. Let's remember college education for prisoners. Let's remember prisoner reentry. Let's also remember solitary confinement. Can we please remember ban the box, where people are being discriminated against for jobs that they're otherwise qualified for, but are banned because they have a record. The disturbing practice when educational institutions are barring some people from getting education because they have a record. Let's remember all those things. And in terms of actionable items, we need to register to vote. We need to vote. Let's vote out everybody that's against criminal justice reform. How about that?
Hey.
Let's volunteer for nonprofit organizations. Let's continue to attend events like this here in White Plains, across Westchester, across New York, across the country. Let's show movies and documentaries. You know, let's speak on events. Let's learn more about the topics and share that information. Let some of us think about careers in this field. And if it's not your career, then whatever it is you do for a living, you know, it's not free to do this work. It costs money to do this work. So at whatever level, however a minor level it is financially, think about contributing that too. Sign a petition when one's come around. Contact your elected officials. You have the right to meet with them. It's not limited to if you're rich or you're some big corporation or some political action committee. No, an individual citizen can meet with them. We can email them. We can phone bank. All these we can teach. You can form student groups if you're in high school. You can form student groups if you're in college. You can have just regular, you're past that different stage of life, but you have other community groups. There's lots, and these are just the things off the top of my head. You can podcast, you can blog, you can write, you can do whatever other idea comes to you. These are just the things that come to me, but there is a way to be involved. It doesn't end here. It needs to continue on. And while it's great to have energy and harness that, remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So pace yourself, be there for the long haul. To do all these changes, they're all possible, but it's going to be a marathon. We need to continue. Stay engaged. Stay engaged. Thank you very much.
All right.
We have one of our last families come up. We have the family of Bernard Washington here. Teresa and Diane, if you'd like to come up and share a few words with us today.
Hi. My father was killed over 30 years ago in White Plains on Lexington Avenue. He was strangled. It was the day after Thanksgiving. We had a family reunion in Connecticut. He drove us back to White Plains. He took me to my job. My sister worked at the hospital, but they took my father too. My 10-year-old son came to my job and told me my father was dead. They wouldn't let my sister and them see my father. They wouldn't let no one in the hospital tell what happened to my father. They strangled him And then they try to say he spoke while he was choking. You can't choke and speak at the same time.
That's right.
He always called me baby girl. I can get stranded somewhere 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I can call my father. My father will come get me. If I break down, my father will come get me. The only thing I would like to know, what is going through these police officers' mind when they are up so personal, taking someone's breath from them?
Hate.
I would like for them to answer just that question.
It's okay, sis. It's all right. I need you to look at the pain. This is 30 years later. And she's still in pain. It doesn't go away.
Right.
It doesn't go away.
Say his name.
Bernard Washington.
Say his name. Bernard Washington. Say his name. Bernard Washington.
Thank you so much for speaking and sharing. And like Kenneth mentioned, I want to thank again all the families who have come out today and shared their stories. We know it's really difficult to relive those memories, to share that loss and share that pain. So thank you so much for sharing those words. This time I'd like to bring up Mayo Bartlett, a local criminal justice attorney and activist in the area, to share some thoughts.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I have to tell you that for nearly 30 years I've been involved in the criminal justice system, and 11 years as an assistant district attorney in this building, and just about 17 years as a criminal defense attorney, civil rights lawyer. I'm one of the attorneys for the family of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. We have been engaged in his effort for 9 years. And I think it's important, number one, that everybody is here for a number of reasons, but one of which is it's easy to talk about atrocities when they happen outside of our community. So everybody can tell you about Trayvon Martin, everybody can tell you about George Floyd, and in the not too distant future, they'll forget about George Floyd or Trayvon Martin because it's going to be somebody else, maybe one of us. And as Jeffrey Descovich proves, it doesn't have to be a black person.
Right.
So the fact that this is happening as much as it does in the United States of America says that we have an illness.
That's right.
And as one of my friends, as one of our colleagues, Wali Muhammad, one of our fellow attorneys who also represents the Chamberlain, says, what does it say about you when you're well adjusted to a sick system?
That's right.
Yeah.
So I just think that, number one, we have to acknowledge, and my condolences go out to each and every person here who has lost a loved one as a result of police encounters, as well as to people who have been falsely accused, even if you weren't ultimately convicted, and those like Jeff Descovich, who lost his entire childhood, all of his years, all of his teenage years. When you start to date, when you start to get a job, and you think about going to school, all of that was taken away from him. He went to jail before there were cell phones. He came out at a time where, look, it was just by the grace of God that he was even able to be here. And then when he came out, as all of the family members who are here, dedicated the rest of his days to making sure that he does everything in his power, everything in all of their power, to make sure it doesn't happen again to somebody else.
Right.
So when it's time for us to think about what we can do, it's important for us to look around here right now, because 9 years ago, right after Mr. Chamberlain was killed, it was fairly lonely out here. We didn't have a lot of people out here. And we had interviews with Soledad O'Brien. We were on CNN. We were in the New York Times. We were on MSNBC. And it didn't seem to matter because we had people from outside of this community that knew more about it than the people in White Plains. To this day, we have people in White Plains who can't tell you what happened to Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. We have a whole bunch of people who have no idea that Jeffrey Descovich exists. So it's important for us to be able to have these conversations, realize that we have the power.
Yes.
We are the community.
Right.
We pay the taxes. Without that, none of this exists. And we have to hold our law enforcement, and we also have to hold our prosecutors accountable. We have to ask our elected officials to stand up for us. And before you vote for people, you have to look at Jamondre Jones and say, listen, this is a person who's going to bring his heart to this race. He's going to be the one who's engaging himself in this battle. And yes, there'll be times when I'm sure he will look back and say, maybe we should have done this differently. I know I do. But we know that his heart's here for the right things. You know that he's here for all of us. This impacts every single one of us. So if we don't act locally, then we're really wasting our time. The most important thing we can do is act locally. And when we stop and when we say, this is because of George Floyd, and this is no disrespect to the Floyd family. My heart goes out to the Floyd family. But we have to have a realization that if the police were on his neck for 6 minutes, he might not have died. If the police didn't kill Mr. Chamberlain, we're probably not here right now. If they just terrified him and tormented him, we're not having this conversation. So the fact that he died, that they stayed on his neck for that extra minute or two, is what lets us know that this is happening here. But how many George Floyds are there in each community? So if we look right now, you can go to Utah where there are not a lot of black and brown people. People are in the streets. Why are they in the streets? Because each of those communities has their own George Floyd. Each and every one of their communities has their own Jeffrey Descovich, their own Kenneth Chamberlain. They have their own Mr. Flowers. They have their own Mr. Maldonado. They have their own Irma Marquez. So when you watch the news and you listen to your elected officials tell you that what happened in Minnesota couldn't happen here, we got to educate ourselves and realize that, hey, by the way, not only can it happen here, sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's worse. Right. So if what happens here is worse, what's wrong with us if we don't talk about that? What's wrong with us if we don't have that conversation here, if we're not honest about what's happening here? So one of the things I want to part with, and I really was here more because I wanted to hear directly from the people most affected, who unfortunately each and every time something happens have to relive their own personal tragedy. Each time somebody dies at the hands of law enforcement, it doesn't matter whether they think that the shooting was a quote-unquote justified shooting or not. If you've lost a loved one to the hands of law enforcement, you relive that. As an attorney who represents people who have lost loved ones, 3 on medical calls, when someone's supposedly there just to see if you're okay, I relive it. Thankfully, I haven't lost a loved one yet. Not yet. But if we can't realize that, we have to look also at the entire criminal justice system, starting with the grand jury. When you present a case into the grand jury, it's supposed to be a neutral body, but it's really not. It's held in the district attorney's office. It's on the 3rd floor in this building. Everything that happens there is secret. Well, why is it secret? When you go to trial, it's not secret. All the witnesses are going to come in and testify. Yeah. So if you can testify at trial, why can't you testify openly in the grand jury? So when we're looking at these cases, when we're looking at a DJ Henry case that's being presented to the grand jury and we're told there's just not enough information, we just don't have enough to bring charges. Well, how do we really know that? If everything that was presented to the grand jury is secret, how do we even know what was presented? How do we know whether hate crimes were presented to the grand jury when they're talking about Mr. Chamberlain? After all, the police did call his father a nigger, so that should, you would think, be presented to the grand jury. We don't know that. In my mind, the grand jury should be outside of this building altogether. It should be in a separate building. The defense should have equal access to that grand jury. It shouldn't be where an assistant district attorney spends the whole month with you and brings you donuts and you get to know him and her and you get to talk to them about your kid's ballet recital. It ought to be an independent and fully transparent body. If you think that there's a reason to have a protective order, you think that someone's coming to hurt the witnesses, make your application to the judge. If the judge thinks that you need to seal it, then that's fine. But these are just some of the things that I think we need to do. I can tell you that this energy is beautiful and that nobody here is standing alone. And that's the most important thing. And I take my hat off to Ken Chamberlain. He's a brother to me. And I will tell you that from the very first day that his father was killed, we also had a walk in White Plains. And that was a walk to go get his father's car. And we were greeted by a lot of people who could have made White Plains Minneapolis. And he's the one who said, no, that's not how we're going to do this. When Mr. Chamberlain died, the Coalition for Police Reform came into being around the killing of his father. And to his credit, I was with him when he said, just show me the evidence. If you can show me that my father didn't do anything wrong, I will walk away. You will never hear from me again. Only after listening to the tapes in the DA's office do we hear the word nigger. We didn't know that that had even been stated. And in fact, when we first heard it, the district attorney acted as if he couldn't have heard it. He didn't know what we were talking about. And we said, can you play that back? He says, what do you mean? I said, well, you didn't hear that? No.
Willful
now,
blindness.
So if he didn't hear that, what makes you think that's ever reaching its way to a grand jury?
There you go. Racist ass crap.
So we have people who have sworn an oath to serve and to protect. And we have some outstanding law enforcement officers, and we have some who have no business being law enforcement officers, and we have some who outright engage in crime. And as Damon Jones says, when you engage in crime, there's got to be a consequence. And that consequence can't be less than the consequences for the rest of us, because we can't go put our knee on somebody's neck. If we do that, there's no question you're going to be held accountable. You're going to prison. That's what's going to happen. So we have to take the time to look at this stuff. We need to look at what's in people's hearts and minds, but we definitely need laws. And if we have the law that's structural, that's there, that'll be there long after all of us are gone, then we run the risk of this happening much less. So my goal is for the youngest person here to be able to be a great-grandparent and know that we have structural things in place so that if I'm a police officer, it doesn't enter my mind that I might be able to do something that's criminal in nature or that's beyond what I should be doing as a law enforcement officer, and be able to get away with that and come back and work either where I am now or go someplace else. So I think that, again, we've got to support our local officials. We have to demand of our local officials that they do things that are important for us. If you go back very brief, not that long ago in the White Plains, the biggest issue was whether they were going to let the French-American school open. That was the whole issue. Nobody talked about what was happening. Nobody talked about people getting killed. And you have to almost wonder if things hadn't gone the way they did in Minneapolis, whether we'd be having this conversation right now. But we're here right now. And we have the strength of the people that are here right now. And there are ways that each of us can work. I would suggest, if you're interested in law enforcement reform and reimagining how we police, who the police officers are, who our judges are, who our district attorneys are, get involved. Every single one of your communities, if you live in New York State, has to have a plan about how they're going to reform police. That's right. Become involved in that committee. Even if you're not on the committee yourself, it's going to be open to the public. Get involved. Make sure your voice is heard. Make sure that you let them know what your concerns are. So I've talked longer than I anticipated speaking, but again, thank you very much. Ken Chamberlain told me I could talk longer, so I did. But I do have to, I just want to end on this note. Everybody here, you're all in my heart and in my prayer, and all of you have lost loved ones. Listen, I pray with you and I grieve for you every single day, every minute. God bless you all.
Thank you for those comments again in that charge to act locally, and that we're not alone. There's so many ways for us to connect here and plug in and find a way to contribute and bring that special skill that you have and that scope you have to the table to help in this fight. I'd like to invite Patrick Snell from the Anti-Racist Alliance to come up and share a few words.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick. I'm with the Anti-Racist Alliance of Westchester. I'm an organizer, organizing for undoing racism. First off, tonight, I'm here standing with the families. We stand with you in solidarity. I'm sorry for your losses to police brutality and police violence. First up, we are fighting strategically. We are studying, we are analyzing the systems. We're trying to assess what is wrong and what is broken and what is structured by racism, what is broken by racism, and we're trying to fight that. We are using data. We are trying to use the data and the analysis that we discover to make change. We need your help. We have a lot of systems that are broken. We need you to stand with us. Kenneth, we stand with you in the Westchester County Coalition for Police Reform. We fight with you for police accountability, which is so needed in our county and throughout the country. And again, the families that are here today, we stand with you and fight in solidarity with you for justice. Until there's no justice, there will be no peace. Thank you.
I'd like to ask William Wagstaff to come up and share a few words with us as well.
Good evening, White Plains. Good evening. Let's do that again. Good evening, White Plains. Good evening. My name is William Wagstaff, and I'm a civil rights attorney based out of White Plains, New York. Unfortunately, I know the pain that the families are feeling, but I know it because I'm in the fight the same as Mr. Bartlett. I represent the family of Maurice Gordon, who was the unarmed man from Poughkeepsie who was killed on the side of the Garden State Parkway by a New Jersey state trooper 2 days before George Floyd. And he was shot 6 times, even though the officer knew that he was unarmed, confirmed such, called to the dispatch and let them know that he patted him down and that he wasn't armed. But he shot this man 6 times and then handcuffed his mortally wounded body and left him to die on the side of the Garden State Parkway.
It's murder. Straight
We got to do something different. I see a lot of t-shirts that say Black Lives Matter. I see a lot of signs. And that has a special place in my heart because I successfully represented the Rockland Orange chapter of Black Lives Matter when they were being illegally surveilled by the town of Clarkstown. And rather than repeat what has been already said, I see the White Plains Police over there. I'm sure that there are people watching at home, and I'm sure you've all seen people posting on social media and other places, Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. Stop saying that because it is offensive to the pain of our ancestors.
Word. I'm trying to tell you.
Black Lives Matter does not mean anybody else is not entitled to dignity. The problem is for too long, our lives have not mattered. So maybe if we say Black Lives Matter too, that'll make you a little bit more comfortable.
Amen. That's right.
But there's never been a question whether white lives matter.
That's
right. Never been.
But since
Never
1619, when the boat got here in Jamestown, it was clear that our black bodies didn't matter.
There you go.
Stop saying
And it's been like that for 400 years.
Stop saying Blue Lives Matter. Because it's clear that the Blue Lives Matter because you can kill somebody, be recorded, and have no consequences, even though the world knows that you've murdered somebody.
Exactly. Talk about it, brother.
It's almost 2 months later and the family of Maurice Gordon still doesn't have an autopsy report. They still won't release evidence to me. You have the New Jersey State Attorney General telling me we're still investigating. We can't complete the independent autopsy. And they expect us to believe that the state of New Jersey is going to investigate itself impartially. Not gonna happen. And nobody's here stupid. That's not by accident.
Damn sure ain't.
But there have been a lot of people that have told you about voting. I want to up the ante. I need you to vote, but be educated before you vote.
There you go.
Don't let the pastor tell you 2 weeks before the election that this is the person that they're with, so you should be with them. The pastor, unfortunately, in many cases, especially in the black church, is in their pocket.
Yeah, way in their pockets.
Don't worry about Democrat, Republican, or Independent. Worry about the issues. Are they speaking to your issue?
That's right.
Vote on the issue, not on the party.
That's right.
There you go. That's right.
At the end of the day, we all want the same things. We just want to be treated fairly. We want the best for our families. And until your voices are heard, until you allow the collective vote to be as strong as the police unions vote, we will not get accountability. Educate yourselves and vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. powerful charge. I really appreciate your words and again that call to action. Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Let's say it again, Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Okay, so our final speaker before I ask Kenneth to come up and close us out tonight is going to be Cynthia Turnquist Jones from the Delta Sigma Theta Westchester Alumni Chapter. Cynthia, please come up.
Black power.
Black power.
I can't hear you. I said black power.
Black power.
If we don't get no justice,
no peace.
So because I am representing Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, they said that I had to write my speech down. I think that was worse. So I'm going to stick to the script. The verdicts. We've heard them. Not guilty, no evidence. The homicide justifiable. No negligence, no charges. You have killed black girls' fathers. You have killed black boys' heroes. You have killed black women husbands. As black mothers, we carry for 9 months. Go through labor for 9 hours just to watch you murder our son in 9 minutes. Just to watch you incarcerate our entire neighborhood. To watch you get paid to educate our children to be dependent on welfare and prepare for prison. And now, with COVID, you want us to walk our black babies into the lion's den. They told me to write it down. You got me lying to my sons.
Yes.
If you become educated, they won't kill you. If you buy a home, they won't kill you. If you wear a tie, they won't kill you. If you talk with respect, they won't kill you. If you put your hands up, they won't kill you. If you stay in the house, they won't kill you. If you pray, they won't kill you. I've been lying to my sons for 22 years. We can't take it no more. We won't take it no more.
Amen.
Emmett Till, Scottsboro 9, Central Park 5, Sean Bell, Malcolm X, Ramali Graham, Amadou Diallo, Muhammad Ba, Jonathan Maldonado, Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., Samuel Cruz, DJ Henry. You are not only murdering our men, you are putting their mothers in the casket alive.
Yes.
We have been hoodwinked. Let's talk about voting. You've heard it. I don't vote because it does nothing. President Barack Obama was voted in by the people. But many did not understand that there was no way in hell that the powers that be that paid police officers to kill black men was going to give a black man any kind of power.
That's right.
So now we have bad officials who are elected by good citizens because good citizens don't vote.
That's right.
Black votes are the lowest. Let's talk about healthy eating. Slaves picked cotton. Corn, peppers, lettuce, tomatoes, and mangoes, but slaves who picked them also ate that. However, in your watered down social studies history books, you depict slaves as weak and ignorant and make sure that in their neighborhoods it's nothing but a bunch of black food deserts. You put your CVS in there. You got CVS on every damn block. You got the liquor store in there. And let's not forget the check cashing spot.
Amen.
They told me to write it down. Let's talk about the census. Because last that I remember, we don't count.
Yeah.
You got schools right now that are getting ready to open, they have no air conditioning. You have schools right now that are getting ready to open, there's no ventilation in there. The windows can't open. You got schools right now in the boys' bathroom, it's so pissy in there, you don't know if you pissed on yourself.
You better say that, son.
And they want to send our babies back to school, and they said that COVID is airborne.
Wow.
Crazy.
Tell the truth.
But you tell us that we need to take the census. The census never counted until 2020. You didn't tell the children about the census before. When I was little, you didn't tell me about the census.
Amen.
And my mother and father paid for me to go to school. Plus they paid property taxes. Double dipping. I didn't learn about the census until a couple of years ago. But now all of a sudden we count. Well, I'm gonna tell y'all this. This is the year of Black Lives Matter. This is the year of the Black Fist counts. Yeah, boy.
All about it.
This is a year where black people equal black power.
Wow.
Right.
And I'm gonna end with this, because I started this in year 2013 when Eric Gardner was murdered.
That's right.
Dear black man. Dear black man, I love you. Dear black man, I need you.
I love you too.
Dear black man, I want you.
I love you too.
Dear black man, we got you.
I love you too.
Dear black man, this will be the last time that we will stand here which say their name and hashtag. Because black man, this is it.
Amen.
This is our time to shine.
Yes.
We got your back, black man.
Amen.
It won't happen again
Yes.
on our watch.
Yes.
Black people, black power.
Yes.
Black power.
Black power.
Black power. Black power. Black power.
It's all about it.
Everyone, thank you so much again for coming out tonight. To close us out tonight, I'm going to hand the mic to Kenneth Chamberlain Jr., who, as so many of our speakers have referenced tonight, Kenneth has been fighting for justice for his father for years now. Just had another hearing actually earlier today. So I'm going to hand this to Kenneth to share his story and what he's been working on.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Come on, man. Make it plain, brother.
I don't know.
Man, make it plain. Come on now.
I know that when I open my mouth, people get uncomfortable.
So let's go.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
But like I always say, sometimes people have to be made to feel uncomfortable
Tell you.
before they'll get up and do something.
Trying to tell you.
We know that over 160 years ago, a chief judge said that a black man has no rights by which a white person is bound to respect.
Plessy versus Ferguson.
We know that 160 years later, we still see the same thing. No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
That is the battle cry of the people who refuse to give in to the pressures from authority when an injustice has taken place. What we have seen right now is a movement that is happening throughout the world because people have now come to understand what was once incomprehensible. And that is that the beating, choking, and killing of unarmed black men, women, and children are not isolated incidents, as some would have you believe. We have bills that have been signed into law. But the problem with that is that we still see some police officers beating, choking, and still killing our loved ones.
That's right.
So while it is great that these bills have been signed into law, and that has only happened because of the pressure of the people. So give yourselves a hand for that. They still mean absolutely nothing if we do not have prosecutors in place who are ready to ensure that the government, its agents and officials are held to the same set of rules that enables a fair and functioning society. You see, social and political change can only happen with serious, intentional, and meaningful action. So you can't straddle the fence on this. No. You gotta pick a side.
There you go.
Either you condone extrajudicial killings and summary executions of our loved ones, or you support their policies. So which one is it gonna be? My father, 68 years old, in his home, only wanting to be left alone, ended up being mocked, taunted, called a nigger, tasered, shot with a beanbag shotgun 4 times, and then shot with live ammunition. The Commissioner of Public Safety out here, without even conducting an investigation, says the shooting was justified.
No, it's not.
The Westchester County District Attorney at that time promised a full and fair investigation, but in May of 2012 came back with no true bill. When they asked her, what about the word nigger, she said yes, it was used, but she justified it and said it was used as a tactic to distract Mr. Chamberlain.
Unacceptable.
Oh, these motherfucking devils.
So now we move forward civilly.
Come on, brother.
The judge at that time takes the heart of our case and dismisses it through qualified immunity.
Because it wasn't his father.
Because the game is rigged.
But as you heard, over 2 years later, they kicked it back. And now we're back in court.
Okay.
But I want to tell you something. You have to keep an eye on these cities.
Yeah.
Because if you can talk about how horrific the killing of George Floyd was, you better damn well talk about how horrific the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. was.
Worse.
Because Westchester County has its own George Floyds too. So what we have done, with the help of some of the nonprofit organizations and stakeholders in the city, is we put together a letter. This letter right now is sitting on the New York State Attorney General's desk. We are not asking, we are demanding that she take a second look at these cases of police misconduct, brutality, and criminality, or where people have died at the hands of law enforcement. This is the letter right here. And New York State Attorney General, I voted for you. Do the right thing. Don't kick it back to the presumptive Democratic nominee, Mimi Rocha. Don't kick it back to her, because this is what the governor signed the bill for. Do your job. Please, do your job. Now some people say, hey, why are you asking for that? Well, you heard Stan Ridley, Christopher Ridley's father, say that the person that took the headshot and killed Chris was his platoon leader. Do you think that was admitted into the grand jury? No, it was not. They said my father posed an imminent threat to life or well-being at that time. And that my father had his arm raised and was attacking the officer. But the coroner's report said the bullet hole made entry 4.5 inches below his shoulder. So his arm couldn't have been raised. Because logic will tell you that if his arm was raised, where would the bullet have gone? Right here. Do you think that was admitted into the grand jury? The knife that my father was supposed to have had in his hand, the skin cells did not match his DNA. So here's the problem. Your New York State Chief Judge, Janet DeFiore, was the current DA at that time. She is now called for an independent review of institutional racism within the court systems.
Oh, it's thick in here. Woof.
Well, Chief Justice, you need to check yourself first.
Exactly. All smoke and mirrors. They don't do nothing.
She was upset that she was receiving an award one day and someone referred to the Office of Court Administration as organized crime.
It's the truth.
She took it personally as an Italian American. So why can I not take it personal that my father was called a nigger and then killed? So I'm going to end, but I want to just say thank you to all of you who came out here, who are standing with these families, such as myself. It restores our faith in humanity. But again, we have to keep our eyes on these elected officials. And my message to them is simple. When you judge or condemn someone, you stand to be judged or condemned by that same standard. So remember, when you yell justice for George Floyd, yell justice for Kamal Flowers, yell justice for Jonathan Maldonado, yell justice for DJ Henry, yell justice for Bernard Washington. Again, I want to thank you all for coming out. Please take some time, talk to the families. It's 8 o'clock. I don't want them to say we overstayed our welcome, but please speak to some of the families that you see here. Thank you again for coming out.